Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. And I rise to move this particular amendment, and I'm joined by my colleagues of the Labour Party, my independent colleagues, and in Sinn Féin on this particular issue. Ceann Comhairle, this amendment is very simple and straightforward. It's to reinstate tax-free shopping that is about to be abolished, particularly for visitors from the United States to these particular shores. And it's a very valuable sector of trade and business within the overall tourism trade in this country. And with the stroke of a pen here, we're using literally a sledgehammer to crack a nut in terms of the vehicle that's being used in the government amendment to close off this particular VAT retail export scheme. The objective behind this is that people who visit Ireland from outside of the European Union, who are resident outside of the European Union, would be able to claim VAT back on their purchases and bring those purchases back with them to their country of origin. And historically, this has been set at a 0% rate, so people don't pay any VAT whatsoever. Now, as we all know, the retail sector and the tourism sector in this country are on their knees at present in terms of the lockdown that we've experienced and the restrictions that we've seen over the last 8 months as a result of COVID-19. And, you know, next year, not only are they going to have to deal with the challenge of COVID-19, the knock-on impact and the carry-forward of debt and the lack of cash flow from 2020 into 2021, but also now having to deal with the unique challenges that are going to be thrown up as a result of Brexit, challenges that are immeasurable at this particular point in time. And effectively, this particular proposal by government is turning the screws on the financial viability of quite a number of businesses across this country, many of them along the western seaboard, but directly within my own constituency. We have Dubarry of Ireland based in Ballinasloe, where there are 50 staff, where there's a question mark over their jobs now as a result of this particular measure by the government. And, you know, jobs across the Midland counties are hard come by. We've seen the challenges in terms of Bordnamona, and in particular, we have a difficult challenge in terms of job retention in the town of Ballinasloe. And here we have 50 people working in Dubarry, and now there's a question mark over some of those particular jobs as a result of this. At present, around 50% of the transactions by US visitors would be under the threshold of €75. So we're excluding 50% of the purchases by US visitors to this country. Now, no other EU country is increasing its VAT rates as a result of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. In fact, Spain, which has the biggest number of UK visitors on an annual basis, is reducing its VAT threshold for non-EU visitors from €80 down to 0. France, which is closer than Britain to Ireland or to the UK, and has a far greater level of frequency of services, it's reducing its VAT reclaim threshold from €175 down to €100. So Spain and France, who have the two biggest sets of visitors from the UK destinations for UK visitors, are reducing their thresholds. And at the same time, we're increasing ours from 0 to €75. And I think that this is going to send out a very bad message to UK visitors, visitors who we want to come and visit Ireland, and we're saying that, we're increasing taxes on purchases that you make here in this jurisdiction, and our counterparts in Spain and in France are doing the exact opposite. And I believe this reputational damage that will be done to the Irish tourism sector, particularly in the British market, could take decades to repair. And in the interim, it's going to do damage to employment prospects right across the tourism and retail sector at a time when they are dealing with the twin financial plagues of COVID-19 and the disruption as a result of Brexit. And I think, it is not the time to be tinkering around with these particular thresholds. In 2019, visitors from Great Britain accounted for 35% of all visitors to Ireland and accounted for 1/5 of the total expenditure by visitors here to this country. Non-EU visitors to Ireland spend over €3.2 billion on an annual basis. Now, the Taoiseach was questioned on this issue earlier on today by my colleague Deputy Matt Shanahan, who has a particular issue, naturally enough, coming from Waterford in terms of Waterford Crystal, a company that is going to be disproportionately affected by this particular announcement. And the Taoiseach said in response to Deputy Shanahan that Revenue have produced an assessment that there needs to be a threshold introduced. Minister, I haven't seen this particular assessment. Can you indicate to me where this is on your website or the Revenue website, or has that assessment been actually published? The Taoiseach then went on to say that the Minister for Finance is actually bringing down the threshold from €175 to €75, which of course is complete and utter spin. The threshold today is €0 and it is going up to €75. What is happening is that the government were proposing changes that would increase that to €175, and because of the fact that my colleagues and I have tabled these amendments, the government have backed down to a certain extent, and I welcome that it's not €175, but it's still significant at a threshold of €75. But can I ask you, Minister, in terms of the revenue assessment that the Taoiseach outlined earlier on, what does it say about those two figures, a €175 threshold and a €75 threshold? Because it seems to me that these are figures that are just being plucked out of the sky, so to speak, and could very easily be brought down to €25, €5, or back to a €0 threshold. And I'd really like to know what type of an assessment the Revenue Commissioners have done. Because on the 5th of November, I asked the Minister for Finance, the number of reclaims that are made, the value of those reclaims. And in a Dáil reply to me, he said, there are no specific or separate reporting requirements, so figures requested by the Deputy are not available. So, if the figures are not available to me as a member of Dáil Éireann, when I asked the Minister for Finance for them, where is this assessment coming from that the Revenue Commissioners have come up with? And I know that, look, the Revenue Commissioners will always look at a belt and braces approach in terms of any particular loophole. And the concern is that a resident from outside the European Union that gets the relief from VAT, now that the UK becomes a third country from the 1st of January, that British visitors here will exploit the system if there is no minimum threshold put in place. But in a parliamentary reply, the Minister said, and I read out what he said, because he said, if the scheme applies to visitors from Britain post-Brexit, and if the UK were to operate a similar scheme for EU visitors, Irish consumers would be able to buy goods VAT-free in Britain, and visitors from Britain would be able to buy goods VAT-free in Ireland, and that this would give rise to considerable displacement of consumer purchases. However, the Minister goes on to say that the UK has announced its intention to exclude EU visitors from the retail export scheme. There's one of your ifs gone straight away, Minister, in relation to that. So the UK is introducing a system that will exclude EU visitors from the retail export scheme. That means that Irish residents will continue to purchase goods in this country, won't be able to exploit any particular loophole in it. We're increasing our threshold by €75. The same exclusion is going to apply in France, where they're decreasing their threshold by €75. The same threshold or the same rules will apply in Spain and visitors from Spain to the UK, where Spain is reducing its threshold by €80. So it seems we're going in the opposite direction to all of our other EU colleagues. The Minister then goes on to say that it is my intention to adopt a reciprocal measure in Ireland to the greatest extent possible if the UK has adopted restrictions. And, you know, we can argue here in relation to this particular measure if it was specific to British residents, but that's not the case. So the Minister is saying that he wants to introduce a reciprocal arrangement in Ireland, as is the case in terms of Britain. Then why are we excluding every other country on the planet outside of the European Union, and particularly a traditionally very lucrative market in the United States? What's the reason for lumping the United States in with this if it's to do with a reciprocal arrangement with the UK? Because that doesn't seem to be the case. The Minister goes on to say that the volume of retail of the export scheme claims that would likely arise would have significant scope for abuse. But as I've already referenced, Minister, when I've asked in parliamentary question for the figures, there aren't any figures available. So how are the Revenue Commissioners coming up with figures regarding the scale of abuse in relation to this particular scheme? Because there isn't any basis for that. But I would put it to you, Minister, and I have drafted my amendment in a particular manner, in that there is provision in this particular piece of legislation, in this amendment that you're putting forward to the VAT law, that introduces a requirement for a proof of importation of goods into the United Kingdom and associated proof of payment, where applicable, of relevant UK VATs and duties for the purchases of goods under the scheme that would qualify for that VAT refund. In other words, Minister, you're introducing two conditions here. One is that you are increasing the VAT refund threshold for all visitors outside the European Union to Ireland from €0 to €75, including visitors from the United States. And secondly then, you're bringing in a very specific provision just in relation to visitors from the UK, that they have to show evidence that they've paid their VAT and other duties in the UK in order to get the reclaim here. Now, Minister, we all know in reality, if people have to go through paying their duties and levies and VAT in the UK and submit documentation for a reclaim here, the vast majority of people will not do that. So I believe that that provision, and that provision alone, will curb any potential exploitation of the difference in VAT for non-EU visitors to Ireland if their country of origin is the United Kingdom, and that there is no need whatsoever to introduce a new threshold of €75. And as I say, I think it sends out internationally the wrong message. I think it sends out the wrong message to visitors from the UK. and I have absolutely no doubt about it, whether it's blatantly or underhand, that the tourism promotion agencies in Spain and in France will quietly whisper to tour operators and visitors that are considering visiting the European Union, well, look, come to Spain, where we have a 0% VAT threshold for a refund. Come to France, where we've reduced our threshold by €75, rather than going to Ireland, where they've actually increased their threshold in advance of the UK leaving the European Union, specifically to penalise British visitors here to Ireland. And I really hope, Minister, you will withdraw this aspect of the proposal, that you will accept the current regime should remain in place, and I hope that you can do that without forcing a vote on this particular issue. Thank you.
And as people will be aware, propose to take amendments number 9, 10 and 11 together for discussion purposes. Amendment number 9 seeks to delete a section of the bill that provides for a threshold for the retail export scheme. The bill, as published, which Deputy Crowe has just referenced, that's in the explanatory memorandum when the bill was originally published, provides that the value of qualifying goods must exceed €175 for third country residents in order to qualify for the scheme. It also requires UK citizens to show proof that VAT and customs and excise duties have been paid. These measures do not eliminate the use of the VAT retail export scheme for UK residents post-Brexit. Instead, by excluding goods below a certain value thresholds and requiring proof of declaration of import into the UK for any goods for which a refund is claimed by a UK-based traveller, they provide a legal basis to protect the exchequer revenues and control and minimise the scope of abuse of the scheme. This is something I believe is necessary when consideration is given to Ireland's proximity to the UK and the volume of traffic between the two countries. So I am, unfortunately, and I will discuss some of that in more detail, but there is a difficulty with myself on behalf of the Government accepting that particular amendment. However, amendment number 10, which results in the limit reducing from €175 as in the bill as published to €75 in recognition of the challenges facing the retail sector and to support the sector in these challenging times. It will apply to all third countries travellers who are seeking the refund, and that has been influenced by no small extent by the views of the members of the Oireachtas in the passage of this bill to second stage, and the views strongly that the 175 figure was very high as a new level to be introduced. And the Minister, Minister Donoghue, took on board everything that was said during the debate today, both inside the House and outside, and in recognition of the challenges facing the retail sector, is coming with an amendment to reduce it to 75, which is a very substantial reduction from the original figure as originally proposed. And that is the result of the Minister taking careful consideration and note and paying close attention to everything that has been said by members in the debate to date. So, but amendment number 11 called for a report on the operation of the amendments affected by the section within 12 months. And a lot of people have said, let's see, is there abuse? You know, don't anticipate the abuse. We are concerned that there is a risk of abuse, and we're probably more prudent to take that choice, but to go that route to introduce the particular €75 limit. But I am also very conscious that many people have said that we need to see how it works, and maybe the matter can be looked at a later date. And I think there is a case in the Deputy's amendment number 11 in the name of Brendan Howland and Judge Nash to review this matter in 12 months. And I will clarify that in just a moment. I do want to make a few points, though, in relation to the operation of this scheme. As I've said already, the scheme won't prevent UK people from travelling. But just to put a fair picture on it, the other side of the equation is the UK has publicly announced that they will not operate the retail export scheme for any travellers from the 1st of January 2021. So Irish travellers to Britain will not be able to reclaim the VAT they suffer there in the same way that British travellers can in respect to goods purchased in Ireland. So at the moment, the UK has moved unilaterally to not operate this scheme. So Irish people travelling to the UK won't be able to get the benefit of the VAT back or reclaim the VAT back, but British and people coming from the UK will be able to do so. So to an extent, the Irish side has been more generous on that issue, where the UK are dropping it completely. And there is an issue, and we've mentioned in relation to the possible abuse of the scheme, and because of the close proximity and the number of transactions and the amount of traffic between the two countries, is the one area we do have to look at. So by excluding goods below €75 from the scheme and requiring proof of declaration of import into the UK for any goods for which a refund is claimed by a UK traveller, the proposed measures will ensure that we avoid any double non-taxation. So it's important that we protect the exchequer, and we've heard of double taxation, but there's a real possibility of double non-taxation in this situation, whereby if a person can claim the VAT back when they get back to the UK, that means they've got the VAT back from the Irish side, but in the UK, the arrangements in the UK, which are separate and are already in place, that proof of payment of VAT in the UK will apply where the value of the goods exceeds the UK's personal allowances. So proof will only be required for goods valued at more than €440. So already there is a threshold in the UK that you don't have to actually produce any proof of payment of the VAT. So you can have people claiming, travelling from the UK, claiming the VAT back under the Irish scheme and going back to the UK where they're resident, and without having to prove that they pay VAT, get a VAT refund. So they can actually get a refund in both countries without this measure in place, and there is a real risk of both countries losing out and non-taxation in both jurisdictions, and that's something that we would have to look at. The issue was mentioned about the threshold in other countries. There are significant thresholds in other countries. We've heard some of them quoted here, but for example, the rate in France is much higher than actually we have here as well. Now, a lot of the discussion has centred on what I would call the practicalities of supporting business and encouraging businesses. And I'm looking at the scheme as it operates, and I would see, and I want people to bear with me on this, I would see this as an opportunity for retailers to increase their business and their sales to foreign visitors when they come to Ireland. I think there's a real opportunity here for do this. Anybody who follows the logic of how people spend money will understand that. You know, I give you the simple example. If you go into a shop, supermarket today, and many of the main supermarkets that have it, if you spend €50 and you have a €10 voucher, you get a tenner off. So there's a big incentive if you're going into the supermarket today in Ireland and you feel like spending €35. It costs you €35. But if you spend €50, you get a tenner off. It only costs you €40. So there's always an incentive in the Irish psyche, and I think in all travellers and tourists' psyche, when they go into a shop, that if they can get an offer of getting something back, they will go there. And I actually think we have to look at the system as it works at the moment. And take, for example, somebody who spends €40 on the souvenir at the moment. Well, actually, what actually happens in that situation is this, is that means they can get about a quarter of that back. And let's just say there's €8 or €9 can be reclaimed by VAT when they give it to the company to process the VAT. The company who processes it takes certainly a minimum of 50% or thereabouts for processing it. So the person actually might be lucky to get €4 or €5 out of that, which is very little. And I don't think I don't think that's a major incentive. But I will put it to you this way. If you go into a shop, and I know Irish retailers have a keen sense of business and a keen sense of their customer. So if a customer comes into the shop and says to them, you know, they want to buy a souvenir and it's €50, it costs them €50 under this scheme, they won't get any VAT back. Or if they spend €60, it'll cost them €60. But if I was a clever retailer and people spoke about craft shops and family members and people who are in shops for maybe more than one generation. If I had somebody coming into my shop and saying, you know, buying something €60 and it's going to cost you €60, I would turn around and say to that person, look, if you spend over €75, you're going to get €18 back. It'll actually only cost you €57. So in fact, there's a great incentive for a tourist who's spending €50 or €60 to encourage them to spend the €75 because it'll actually cost them less when they get their VAT rebate back. So it's a bit like the person going into the supermarket, that every Irish person does understand that if you have a voucher there that you get a tenner off if you spend 50, well, who's going to spend €48 if you spend the extra €2 and you get a tenner back? So I think there's a great incentive here. This is the exact same principle that I keep saying Irish people understand very carefully, and tourists understand that if you encourage a person to spend the €75, you're going to get approximately €18 back in a VAT rebate. That is a great incentive to encourage people to spend the €75 that they might not have actually done had that incentive not been there. So I actually think that's a point that needs to be, and I can say that point will not be lost on the retailers of Ireland and the souvenir shops and the craft shops and all the companies that have been mentioned here. They will encourage people, spend the extra few bob, and you know what, it will actually cost you less, you're going to get VAT back. So that will encourage purchases of over 75, and it will change the current dynamic where people say lots of the purchases are below that. I think we'll find a situation that it will encourage trade, and most of the purchases will be now over €75 into the future. And that's more business and more profit for the local business, because I think they will be able to make extra sales, and that's actually what we want to do, is encourage business. I do accept that wasn't probably the reason why the revenue proposed that, but when I saw this proposal coming into the Department of Finance, I could see a benefit as a person who regularly uses the €10 voucher off the €50 purchase in the supermarket. I said, this sounds like a similar scheme, and I think it's sensible, because you encourage people to spend, and that will help the tourism trade in all the different areas that have been mentioned throughout the country. The other thing I do want to say is that there's been quite a debate here this afternoon, and the idea of trying to have consensus and a general approach to this matter is much appreciated and accepted, and there has been goodwill and good support to ensure that this legislation is passed, unanimously, if that's the right word, by this House without the calling for a vote. And we are listening carefully, and I'm very much taken by the amendment by Brendan Howland and Judd Nash, and I read in to it that section 11 in page 2 between lines 22 and 24 to insert the following: review of operation of section 64, and not later than 12 months after the coming into operation of section 64, the Minister shall review the operation of the amendments affected by that section and lay before the Houses of the Oireachtas a report of his or her conclusions from the review. I think that's actually a sensible compromise. Having listened to the debate here in the course of today, I would encourage people to accept the state's view that there is the legitimate possibility of people paying tax in neither jurisdiction and both sides losing out, also in recognition of the fact that we have a system in place to allow UK travellers into Ireland get VAT back on purchases over 75, notwithstanding it's not reciprocated on the other direction. We can't get anything back there, and we are being generous on that basis by allowing the scheme to continue, where it's not the case in the UK as part of their arrangements and public statements today. And I do accept, people said, is there evidence because the UK is directly involved in this legislation and it has been cited in the original section 64, it is necessary to have something in this legislation specifically got to do with the UK travellers, and the point has been well made that it does catch travellers from outside of the UK and outside of the EU and America or China, as the case may be, and that may be, but it would make the operation of the scheme a little bit more complicated to have different rules for people outside the EU, one rule for the UK and maybe a different rule for Chinese or American visitors. And I do accept maybe that aspect needs to be examined further in the light of experience that we can gather over the 12-month operation of this scheme. But I think it's only fair at this stage to take the prudent course and introduce the measure and review it as Amendment number 11 says. So on that basis, I think on behalf of the Government, we would be happy to accept Amendment 11 as a fair and sensible approach in relation to reviewing the operation of this after 12 months, and this time next year, I'm sure, during the finance bill, and that's another point has been made. Some of this maybe or maybe not could have been in the finance bill. I think it's more germane to this legislation because it deals with the UK. Yes, there is a sentence that's not specific to the UK in the bill, but there's trying to introduce a level of consistency in the changes we were making. That's why we included that particular sentence in this bill, to have a consistent for all countries outside of the EU. And I hope deputies will see the bona fides we operated on that, and I accept the good case being made that really we do need to examine it and see how it works out. Instead of voting down the situation here today, let's give this €75 a chance. I would say Fáilte Ireland will be very strong in the promotion. When you come to Ireland, you spend €75 or more, you'll be able to get VAT back. That will encourage people to spend while they're here. It will encourage retailers to encourage their customers to spend more when they get them into the shop. And I'm sure that lots of shops will take great advantage of that particular scheme of having the equivalent of a voucher. You get 23% back if you spend over €75. So, but I would like to see how that will work out in the course of a year. So on that basis, as I've said before, the government amendment in relation to reducing the figure from 175 to 75, we need to keep that in this legislation because part of that section is UK specific, but I also accept the point that will be made in respect of amendment number 11 in the name of Deputy Howland and Ash for the 12-month review, which I think in the circumstances is a very fair consideration. So I would hope the House would agree to accept the government amendment alongside that amendment to ensure there is a 12-month, and it's going to be clear, it's going to be in legislation. It's not a commitment from me here today or on behalf of the Department of Finance. That amendment will be written into the legislation when we conclude business here this evening, because we're clearing all stages. There's not an opportunity to come back to report stage next week. This is committee stage and report and final stage, so there's not an issue to tease that out in the coming days. So I hope people will see the bona fides of the government in accepting what I consider is a fair amendment in respect of amendment number 11, and I propose we would accept that if the deputies are agreeable.
Just very briefly, Minister, I'm not going to rise to your bait, but I just want to correct the record because I wouldn't like people to take up the wrong end of the stick in relation to it. And look, we accept it. You've gone as far as you're going, and that's it. And I accept that. And look, that's your prerogative in relation to it. But let me make it clear: the threshold is being increased by 7,500%. That's what it's being increased by. Don't be trying to twist it around and say, oh, well, we had it at 175 and we're bringing it down to 75. It's gone up by 7,500% is what you're increasing the threshold. You're saying that the double tax back, you're afraid and you're trying to protect the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Well, I've heard a lot of things here in my time in this House, Ceann Comhairle, but it's the first time I've ever heard a Minister for Finance come into this House here and all he's worried about is the takings of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The last Parliament that was worried about that abolished itself in 1800, and I don't think we're going to go back and do that now. So look, Minister, don't worry about the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Let's worry about our own small indigenous businesses around this country, not worry about the British coffers. The other point was that you said that you can't make different arrangements for the UK compared to other countries. You might have a look at the legislation that's in front of you, Minister, because the legislation in front of you specifically identifies UK tourists as being very different from every other country in the world. They have additional conditions that they have to comply with in terms of having to provide certification that they've paid their VAT and duties in the UK before they can claim it here. And I said at the outset that I support that provision. I'm willing to leave that provision in, but I'm not willing to have a situation where you're putting a double system in place, which is penalising every other tourist across the world who had that entitlement up to now, who is going to actually crucify small indigenous business the length and breadth of this country. And Cancorla, we're pressing the amendment.
Thank you very much. Item number 15, withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union Consequential Provisions Bill 2020, committee stage. Amendment number 9 in the name of the deputies Naughton, Howland, Nash, Harkin, Fitzmaurice and Munster. The question is that the amendment be made, and on that question a division has been challenged. Tellers Thaw, Deputy Dennis Naughton and Deputy Duncan Smith, Neil, Minister Jack Chambers and Deputy Brendan Griffin.